Judge Amy Coney Barrett has just given her opening statements in front of the Judiciary Senate Committee. She praised late Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg for opening doors, even though they are ideologically opposed. The Supreme Court nominee's opening statement focused on how her mentor, the late Justice Antonin Scalia, influenced her and her view that policy choices should be left to lawmakers.
Courts have a vital responsibility to the rule of law, which is critical to a free society. But courts are not designed to solve every problem or right every wrong in our public life. The policy decisions and value judgments of government must be made by the political branches, elected by and accountable to the people. The public should not expect courts to do so, and courts should not try. That is the approach that I have strived to follow as a judge on the Seventh Circuit. In every case, I have carefully considered the arguments presented by the parties, discussed the issues with my colleagues on the court, and done my utmost to reach the result required by the law, whatever my own preferences might be.
CBC's Ellen Morrow is tracking the hearing for us and joins us now from Washington. So, Ellen, in other comments, the Judge Barrett also sort of introducing herself, wasn't she? Speaking about her 7 children, for example.
That's right, and this is a pretty standard opening statement for a Supreme Court nominee. You describe a little bit about yourself, your view of the law, and how you'll be as a judge. And as we heard just there, Amy Coney Barrett said she wouldn't let her personal views dictate her rulings, and her personal views are quite known. She's been vocally anti-abortion, signing newspaper ads to that effect, giving talks to anti-abortion groups. She's also criticized a past Supreme Court ruling that upheld Obamacare or the Affordable Care Act. Coney Barrett obviously didn't get into those views in her opening statement, but she said, as we heard, she will follow the law when making her rulings, regardless of if the outcome is to her own preference or not. She also said, as we heard, that it's not up to the courts to right every wrong. That is part of her originalist view of the law, interpreting the Constitution as it was written by the Founding Fathers in 1787 versus trying to interpret it based on today. Republicans laud that conservative stance. Democrats say that it means she won't protect people's rights, i.e. a woman's right to choose or the rights of LGBTQ people. They argue that in that sense, she's the opposite of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, whose seat she would be filling on the court.
And certainly we're hearing a lot from both sides. There was a protest before the hearings and comments after, Ellen.
Yeah, well, and Democrats are, what we heard in the hearings, Jennifer, making this all about health care. We saw nearly every Democratic senator have a placard with a photo of one of their constituents facing dire health challenges who would lose their coverage without Obamacare. The Democrats say that because Amy Coney Barrett has been critical of a past decision upholding Obamacare, that she would vote to strike it down. And they're hammering that point now because obviously the pandemic, more than 215,000 Americans dead, and because the Supreme Court is set to hear a case that could gut Obamacare on November 10th. Here's what Democratic vice presidential nominee Kamala Harris had to say.
This hearing should have been postponed. The decision to hold this hearing now is reckless and places facilities workers, janitorial staff, and congressional aides and Capitol Police at risk. Not to mention, tens of millions of Americans are struggling to pay their bills. It should be prioritizing coronavirus relief and providing financial support to those families.
So that's the Democratic line of attack today, Jennifer. For Republicans, they argue that Coney Barrett is highly qualified for this position, and they spent a fair amount of time today hitting back against the criticism that what they're doing is improper. We're just a little more than 3 weeks from Election Day, and in 2016, the Republican Senate blocked a Barack Obama Supreme Court nominee, Merrick Garland, months ahead of Election Day that year, saying it was just too close. Republicans argue that it's different this time around because they control the White House and the Senate. Now, today was the tamest day of the hearings because, as I said, it was just opening statements. The real drama, for lack of a better word, begins tomorrow when the questioning of Coney Barrett gets underway.
Should be fascinating, and we'll be watching. Ellen, thank you for this. CBC's Ellen Morrow in Washington. J.C. Planis is an elections attorney, a law professor at St. Thomas University, and a former Republican member of the Florida State Legislature. Planis says that so far, Judge Barrett is weighing her words carefully.
She is a judicial conservative. She is a textualist, and I don't think we heard anything different. I do believe that based on the last confirmation hearing that we had, especially how contentious it was, she wanted to extend an olive branch, and I believe she has done that.
Well, as you know, we have seen many members on the Democratic side of this Senate committee speaking today about some of their concerns. Time after time, holding up a picture of one of their own constituents who has an underlying health condition that they fear they could lose their health insurance with the appointment of this justice because the Affordable Care Act is up for review in front of the Supreme Court. What do you make of some of what we've heard from, for example, Vice Presidential candidate Senator Kamala Harris today?
You know, listen, I think there's two issues. I think, number one, the Democrats on the committee are trying to make sure that their beef is not with Judge Coney Barrett. It is with the administration in making this appointment. It's not just that we have an election in 3 weeks. It's that the election is already taking place. Even here in Florida, we have more than 1 million people who have already cast their votes. It's not that there will be an election, it's that we are currently in an election. As far as the issue with the Affordable Care Act, yes, I do think that many members are actually lobbying Judge Coney Barrett as opposed to anything else respect to their to their questioning. I do think that part of the problem here lies in the fact that for 3 years, the Trump administration has sought to replace the Affordable Care Act, and they have not. So if this is kicked out in court and people lose pre-existing conditions, especially in a time of COVID, that's what's extremely worrisome. We don't know what the long-term ramifications of COVID are. As you know, 10 years ago, we found out that many cases of cervical cancer were caused by a virus called HPV. We don't know if exposure to the coronavirus may lead to certain cancers down the road. If we eliminate pre-existing conditions, how are individuals who contacted COVID now and later are diagnosed with a cancer that is caused by COVID going to be covered? And that's why it's so important to so many members that there is no lapse in time in health insurance without a guarantee that pre-existing conditions will be covered.
You are, as I introduced you, a former Republican member of the Florida State Legislature. But am I hearing you correctly that you have some issues not only with the timing of this, but also the president's choice here?
I have issues with the president. I am one of the thousands and thousands of Republicans that have endorsed Joe Biden. I am active with the Hispanic coalition of the Lincoln Project. I am active with a large group of former Florida legislators who have all united to endorse Biden. I have a problem with the way this process was done. In many ways, I agree politically with many of the conservative jurists. Judge Coney Barrett, although I believed that our Florida former Supreme Court Justice Barbara Lagoa was much better qualified to be a Supreme Court Justice than Amy Coney Barrett, there are many ways in which I would have been supportive of her had her nomination come at a different time. But in the middle of an election where the administration has actively sued to get rid of the Affordable Care Act, which although I initially opposed, I have come to the realization that it is essential, especially in a pandemic, and therefore it would be irresponsible to have this go away right now. I've come to the position that it is not in the best interest of the unity of this country to confirm any justice right now, regardless of how qualified they are.